Okay, so we have EQ'd and compressed these tracks. The next step, barring anything sticking out, is adding some reverb, some space. Let's try a fun reverb on this lead here. We'll just create a send. We'll send out bus 1, just an unused bus. Creates this aux track. Label it synthverb. Audio effects. Valhalla room. The Valhalla delay and just this whole package, the Valhalla plugin package is, used in every pro mix basically. Like these are professional grade plugins for really good prices. I think they're like $50 each, and I got these on an industry discount kind of thing. But vintage verb, room, delay, I use those on almost every mix. Supermassive is free. Definitely go grab that one. There are a couple of these that are free on there. Definitely go grab those. I use Supermassive very regularly as well. But definitely room, vintage verb, and delay. Like those are staples. So we'll throw room on here. And just out of the gate, this is already going to sound good. We'll turn up the send to the bus. So already that sounds, it's adding like a lot already without even adjusting this reverb. And so like we did with the compressor, where we took the BPM of the song and put it into this lovely calculator here, we're going to do the same thing and use it for Reverb Tails. A lot of delay plugins, if you're using analog delay, you might have to there won't be a tap tempo or there won't be a sync to the tempo button. But a lot of the delay plugins will have just the sync option already, so you don't really need to know the millisecond to BPM conversion. But Reverb Tails, this can change the game when it comes to putting reverbs and stuff on your tracks. So 2 seconds is the default, and it sounds fine. It sounds good, don't get me wrong. So we'll take this 2-second tail and just kind of come over here to our calculator and see where the closest 2-second interval is. So half note is a 1 second or 1000 millisecond interval. That'd be a little too short, I think. So seconds per measure. So this is 2.182. That's 2.18 seconds per measure in 110 BPM. So we're real close here. 2 seconds is real close to that. That's probably why it sounds good just out of the gate for a long tail on this thing. Let's bump it up to 2.18. And I'm going to say right away, this probably is not going to be a noticeable thing. This is something in this instance that's going to be super subtle. It might be placebo. It might be just me wanting it to sound better. But to me, that sounds a little bit better. And again, subtle moves like that over the course of many tracks adds up a lot. So another point of interest here when it comes to time and BPM is the pre-delay on your reverb. You can use this to be real creative. So we'll look at the default's 10 seconds. So I've found that a 64th note amount of pre-delay on reverb can make a good amount of difference. So let's just, depending on the part, it's kind of a taste thing. So let's see what 34 seconds or 34 milliseconds sounds like on the pre-delay. We went from 10 to 34. So what that's doing, what the pre-delay is doing in this instance is the dry signal, we're hearing the dry signal, and then 34 milliseconds after we hear the dry signal, or 1/64th note after we hear the dry signal, the reverb is coming in. So what that's doing in the context of the mix, again, is subtle, but it's making the sound not sound as muddied and underwater as it might sound if maybe we had no pre-delay. Techniques like that can, especially in vocals, can help the vocal stick out while still having a strong tail to it. Because some things, especially maybe the synth, you might want to sound like it's more underwater or more washy. So just keep that in mind for pre-delay. I'm going to keep it at the 64th note because I think it is allowing the dry signal to kind of stick out a little more on the transients, which might sound counterintuitive because that's what we were compressing for earlier, is to take out some of those transients. But I don't I don't want this to sound like we just slapped a reverb on it and called it good. Professional mixes have either a sidechain compressor before the reverb, or they use pre-delay to make sure that the reverb ducks down when the vocal is happening or when the lead melody is happening, so that it doesn't get washed out. And obviously that is to varying taste and depending on genre, etc. So just keep that in mind for pre-delay. I'm going to leave it. So that sounds pretty cool. It sounds a little muddy, as reverbs tend to do. And so always, always, always EQ your reverb return track. Delays, anything. Always sculpt the tone even further, because you're never going to get a perfect sound coming out of this reverb. It sounds good, don't get me wrong, and it has EQ in it, for sure. But there's a lot of low end that we need to cut out of this. Like, for one, everything under 20 here, the second we go play this in a system with subwoofers, that's going to go off the charts. So, being a little laggy there. So we'll just cut that out. So all that right in there needs to go away, basically. Scale got turned up, so it was a little more of a cut than I intended. I'll do about 6 decibel cuts normally, not 12 or 9 right off the bat. That's making the reverb sit a lot better. It's harder to hear the reverb for sure, but it's making it sit a lot better. And then another thing I would maybe look at is cutting out some high end with a low pass. Like that. And then maybe some more like mid-range around 800, 700. Just to make the reverb real sweet. And then so that's going to lower the volume of the reverb. Obviously, we just cut out a lot of frequencies, right? So you can typically go and increase the send now to compensate. So this is with EQ, and I'll take it off here. With. It cleans it up a lot, and you can go too far. I might have gone too far. I might back some of that off a little bit, but these moves clean up the sound a lot. Back the send down a hair. So let's just A/B with and without reverb. So this is without reverb. So reverb is definitely where we start getting into stylistic choices and genre choices and all that kind of stuff. It is very hard for me personally to choose between wet and dry reverb or wet and dry like signals on tracks. I am a big fan of real dry stuff, and I am also a big fan of the vibe that reverb creates. And it is sometimes really tough for me personally to tell like what direction I should take the song that I'm writing or working on or whatever. Because it's definitely more straightforward, and that might suit certain styles a lot better. But this just adds, like, it puts you in a space, you know what I mean? Like it creates an atmosphere for you to live in within the song, which ultimately I think is gonna be better. So let's try the same thing on this intro pad. We might set up a different reverb entirely. We might send this out to like bus 2 now and set up a whole new reverb. Or, for this, it kind of might, I think this would sound cool if we just send it to that same reverb, because that reverb is kind of kind of well suited for this kind of ethereal thing. So we just turn up the send a little bit. And already it's more interesting. Already it's sounding more like a song, right? So A, B, this is without reverb. And then with. It just makes it a little smoother too. Reverb is kind of weird in the sense that if you've already compressed a track and it's still like not as like smooth as you want, reverb can really go a long way in smoothing out dynamics. Not even in the sense that it's reducing volume or anything, because it's definitely, we're not reducing any volume here, right? We're actually adding volume, but it's making it sound a lot more smooth. And when I say we're adding volume, I mean we're adding volume in the sense that this reverb signal was not here before. So we're adding like a whole bunch of sound that was not there, but somehow it's sounding more uniform and matched. So on the topic of multiple reverb buses versus fewer reverb buses, when you have multiple tracks in your mix sent to the same reverb in the same space, it can add a cohesion and a glue to the mix. That's not to say that your mix can't be good and your mix can't be gelled if you use a different reverb sound for like everything, you know. So typically what that means is I'll have a reverb for like drums. I'll have a different reverb for lead stuff, whether that's guitar or synth and stuff. I'll have a different reverb for vocals. Even if it's the same reverb setting, I'll still make a new bus separate from like a synth lead and the vocals. Even if it's the same reverb setting, I'll have them separate so that I can sidechain the compressor to the vocal reverb, so that when the vocals are playing, when it's singing, the reverb signal is ducking down so that the vocals stick out a little more. So that even if it's the same reverb setting, that is a benefit of separating them out. Obviously, that increases computer processing power and stuff, so there is a limit. Let's add a small reverb or small room sound to these guitars. Select both of them, send it out a new bus. We'll do bus 2. Creates a new aux track. We'll label it guitar verb. And off to the races. Let's go Valhalla. Let's do vintage verb to show you that kind of thing. This also is going to sound great out the gate. It's going to have way too long of a tail. This tail is, notice how this is a 4-second tail versus the other reverb's default was a 2-second. So it's going to be way longer, but like that is just a good sounding reverb, you know? Again, I think that might be too long of a tail for what we're going for, but so again, this is where stylistic choices are going to come into play. Like that might sound good to some people, and it's don't get me wrong, I like the sound. For my preference and kind of what I'm hearing right now, I heard it take away some of the bite and the attack of the guitar, not in a frequency way, but it like I was talking about how reverb can smooth out the sound dynamically. It was doing that too much. And so part of that, I think, is not necessarily the volume of the reverb or the amount that we're sending to it. I think it's the tail. So 4 seconds, that mathematically is very close to this seconds per measure. So that would be the tail is lasting about 2 measures, a little under 2 measures, but close enough for us to count it. So let's go half of a measure. Let's go half note. Let's do 1090 milliseconds. And again, I'm not going to change these modes. These are different algorithms. You could do this on the other reverb as well. I'm a big fan of the default. If the default's not doing it for me, if I had something else in mind, I'll go in and start changing them. But like I love it. The color on this is going to affect the EQ curve a little bit. I think 1970s is going to be a nice warm vibe. 1980s is a little brighter, and then now is the brightest. They're just kind of generic labels for the EQ curve of the algorithm. So let's hear what that reverb's doing. So I like what that's adding for sure. It might be a little loud. Let's turn it down a little bit. I still think it could be beneficial to cut the reverb time down more and make it more of a small room. That sounds pretty good actually. It's just adding a little some, you know, a little magic on it. Like there's no word for it. It's just adding something to the sound. This is no reverb with reverb. So and together, that's gonna go a long way to gluing together the whole mix. So again, always EQ the reverb send. This stuff right in there is a little too much. We'll put a low cuts or a high pass on it. Put a low pass on it. And it might be a little too much reverb. Let's see. Again, real subtle, but just some glue. Let's go ahead and change his color. Let's try 1980s. It's not as warm, but the warmness was kind of making it a little muddy, a little dull sounding. So we've added reverb to the synth and the pad. We've added reverb to the guitar and the double. Bass, don't add reverb to the bass. There, you know, if maybe a bridge or, you know, a section like calls for it, yes, but just by default, don't add reverb to the bass unless you have a vision for it. And even then, know that it's gonna muddy up your mix. Same with the kick drum. Unless you have a vision for it and you have a goal in mind with it, don't add reverb to the kick drum, just generally. Where reverb comes in as far as drums is snares can sometimes be cool with some reverb, sometimes not. Overheads can sometimes be cool with some reverb. Hi-hat mic can sometimes be cool with some reverb. I'm personally a fan of the dry drums. I think it serves the song a lot better. Keeps the bass and the drums are just keeping it driving, and then everything else on top is just kind of spice and sprinkly kind of stuff. These guitars are obviously a rhythmic part, but they're adding color more than they're adding like a different part, you know. They're doing exactly what the bass is doing for all intents and purposes. So yeah, we have EQ'd the tracks in a corrective manner. We have compressed the tracks in a corrective manner to balance out the dynamic and the frequency spectrums a little more. We've added some reverb to create some space on the lead instruments and a little bit of room sound on the guitars. And those are essentially the steps to creating a mix. Other than that, you're just balancing volume between the tracks to your taste. There are like guidelines, but there aren't hard and fast rules. A lot of it is to taste. So unless you're like going out to create a certain genre and you want to pigeonhole yourself like that, you know, this part now that we're getting into as far as like reverb spaces and balancing out the volumes and making stuff louder than the other, we're getting into taste territory. Definitely take these techniques and apply them to the rest of the tracks that you end up adding in this project. Don't just stop with these 6 or 7 whatever tracks. So yeah. Holla if you have any questions.